First of all, yeah, I'm happy to join the gathering, although in this kind of disembodied form. But it's better than nothing. And yeah, I'm happy to be a part of the event. And so my today's talk is gonna be an attempt to revisit the issue of how semiotics and memetics, or some sort of study of memes, relate to each other. And in particular, I will try to explore some of the many confusions about the concept of meme, and we'll try to discuss how semiotics can be helpful in terms of resolving some of those confusions. And secondly, there's also an issue of how the two domains relate to each other, how semiotics and memetics can or cannot work together, and whether there is any useful way of using the concept of meme in semiotics. And essentially, I will try to demonstrate that there is a series of conceptual choices that we can make in semiotics when we try to import the concept of meme into semiotics, and those are the choices about whether we essentially consider meme just as another word for sign, or we introduce some stricter definitions for meme. And if we do introduce some stricter definitions, what are they? And so here we have different choices of how we narrow it down. And so one of them is the option of considering memes as a case of quasi signs. Another one is the option of using the notion of logonomic signs, the notion from social semiotics. Another option is to use the concept of emonic sign. That is this kind of special kind of iconic sign, the sign based on imitation. There's also some choices we have to make about whether we assume memes to be necessarily agentive. So are memes agents, or is it just kind of a metaphoric way to speak about memes, and we're not actually assuming that memes are agentive, although some of the original definitions or original discussion about memes did suggest that they are agents. And finally, there are also some other semiotic nuances that we can bring into the ways in which we conceptualize memes. And I think on this stage, I will share the screen. So let's start with the original definition of meme by Dawkins, just to have it on the table. And
don't see
yes.
it somehow.
Oh, you don't see it.
We are seeing it. We need to change.
Okay.
It's fine.
Okay, sorry, it's not you, it's me.
Okay. It's not the most important part of the most important slide, and I'm sure you're more or less familiar with the idea of meme. So even if it will take some time to fix it, I will just keep speaking. And so the concept of meme, the way it was introduced, it basically presents an idea that memes are these units of cultural replication, or to be more precise, they are themselves replicators that propagate themselves through imitation. And so this is the original definition that was introduced in mid-70s by Richard Dawkins. And after that, there was an attempt or even a series of attempts to build a whole discipline around this notion or maybe a metaphor that was called memetics. There's also a whole range of different ways to define memes. Some of them are very loose. Just to give an example, here's the example from Leon Galora, who just defines meme as anything that can be a subject of an instant of experience. So even before we discuss the issues of how memes relate to science, there's a lot of tensions and confusions inside the domain of memetics. And the domain of memetics is also doesn't feel that well, doesn't work that well at the moment. I would say it is seeing a kind of a decline after mid 2000s. But still, even if memetics is no longer around that much, the concept of meme, and at least the word meme, is very much around. And when it comes to how memetics or how the study of memes and semiotics work, I would say there is a kind of this love-hate relationship, more on the hate side maybe, but overall, there's also some kind of the idea that there is a lot of possible convergence between the two domains. Sometimes the way semioticians just propose to resolve it is just by saying that we don't actually need the word meme, and this is just another more confusing word to say the same thing as the word sign. But yeah, the question I will try to focus on is whether we can actually make the notion of meme less confusing and more useful for semiotics and with semiotics. And here are the number of choices we can make that I have already mentioned in the introductory part. And so if we try to map all these options here, I'm afraid that this chart is more confusing, even more confusing. So I will unpack it one element by one. So let's see how we can deal with each of these questions and what actually options, what choices we can make, and what are the implications of these choices. So first, we can choose between defining memes as any cultural science. Second, we can define memes as logonomic science, and third, we can define memes as quasi-science. And so when it comes to cultural science, this is something that we can see in some of the writings, for example, from Sibiok, where especially in the early writings, he kind of said that there are a lot of similarity between memes and science. But if we try to make the definition more strict, there can be useful ways to use some other notions from semiotics, like the notion of logonomic sign. And the notion of logonomic sign suggests there is a special kind of science, or at least a special capacity of science in social semiosis to restrict who is able to produce which science and under which circumstances. And so one way to define memes is to say that memes are not just science, but memes are logonomic science. So memes are these science that regulate the production of other science. And this more strict definition can be useful because in that case, we can also develop a definition, distinction between memes and themes. So memes are science that carry the instructions and rules about how social semiosis should work, and themes as the artifacts and actions produced based on those signs. But obviously there is a problem here because, as I have already mentioned briefly, logonomic science is not necessarily a different kind of science. Logonomic capacity is almost omnipresent in social semiosis because at least we have this emonic aspect of any social semiotic sign, in a sense that artifacts and actions work as examples for other artifacts and actions. And this is where the concept of emon, of the emonic sign, can become relevant. So we can add this emonic aspect and to make the definition of meme even more strict. And so yeah, this is just a definition of emon by Kalavekul. And if we continue with this line of thought, we can also find in Calavi as well the idea that still, although there are some similarities between emons and memes, the tradition behind how the word meme is used suggests that memes are often imagined not just as emonic science, but as this degenerate emonic science, the science that only have the capacity to be copied without the capacity to be interpreted. And this is from where we can switch from the idea of memes as logonomic science to the idea of memes of quasi science, to memes as degenerate science in some sense. And so here we can define memes as this kind of post-semiotic quasi-science. So science which habitually reproduce a particular typical effort. So these are science that produce energetic interpretants in persist terms, but do not produce habit changes. So they don't produce logical interpretants. And this is in line with some of Peirce's original attempts to discuss the issue of quasi-science. So the famous example about quasi-science is this example with the ground arms command. So this is where the Peirce shows that there are some some cases where science just produced this energetic dynamical interpretant that reproduces some particular typical action, but maybe the logical interpretant is not present there. So we have these three choices. So memes are as any cultural science, memes as logonomic science, memes as quasi science. But this is not where the confusion ends. There's also a whole other set of issues, and those are the issues with whether memes are agents. And one reaction we find when semioticians try to respond to these question can we find, for example, in Terence Deacon, who says that when we speak about memes as agents, we basically misplace the agency. We place agency in the patterns that are reproduced in a bigger dynamical system that is agentive. But these patterns themselves that reproduced are not agents that although they are important parts of an agentive system, but they themselves are not agentive, and it is a misconceptualization to assume that they are. There's also another way to approach this issue. We can say that memes are agents, but they are kind of a special kind of agents, and here we can draw from the theory of semiotic agents from Alexei Sharov and Tomi Vekhawara, and they discuss the issue of sub-agents. So the secondary agents that perform some functions for primary agents and that are produced by primary agents. And in this sense, we can speak about memes as these cognates, kind of cognitive sub-agents. The example Alexei and Tomi give in their book is that, for example, the interpretant of smoke, of the noticing of smoke, this activity of alarm, escape, and rescue, that is triggered by a particular signal as an interpretant can be sub-agentive. So it's a particular agent sign that is built into a bigger primary agent and performs one of the functions for it. And importantly, we can also notice that here Alexei and Tomi speak about memes not as science but as interpretants. And this is one more important nuance, because sometimes we can notice that semioticians tend to speak about memes, not about signs as a whole, but memes as interpretants or memes as sign vehicles. So we can associate different elements of the semiotic triad with the word meme. And so these are two sets of choices. One set is about what kind of signs are memes, and second set of choices are what kind of agents, whether they are agents, memes are. And so we can, in a condensed form, chart our choices we can make in a form of this table. But actually, there are even more nuance we can still bring into this model, because actually we can also make distinctions about types and tokens. We can say that memes are just tokens, or memes are types. And so there are even more definitional options in that case. There is also these are other questions that I have already mentioned about whether memes are signs as a whole, sign vehicles, or interpretants. And so essentially, if we put all these different questions together, we basically end up with 66 different ways to define what memes are. They all make perfect sense. I don't want to be dismissive about any of them, but I would say that maybe the one of the core messages about of my today's presentation is that we have to be really careful with using the word meme. We have to be very aware what exactly do we mean when we say meme, because there are like 66 different things we can imply when we say memes. If you want to read some of these analyses in more detail, there's a chapter in book that appeared a couple years ago. The chapter I authored, and today's presentation is based on that chapter with some tweaks I made after that. And there's also another one of my papers about how genetics and semiotics can be put in relation to each other. But anyway, yeah, I would finish with the idea that maybe the relations between semiotics and memetics is difficult, but we certainly, from this analysis, we can see that there is no way to speak about the cultural evolution, without some theory of mean making. So for me, it makes little sense to discuss memes without semiotics. So we have to find a way to build some bridges, but we have to be careful with how we conceptualize things as we build those bridges. And this was my last slide, and thank you for your attention.
Questions, Yogi, and tell us, Ivan, if you can hear him or not.
I can hear you, but I don't hear the questions from the room. So if people have questions, they probably have to come to the.
Yeah, I think it's best if people come up to the computer so that you can hear. So Ivan, thank you for your presentation. It was great, as usual. I'm curious how you would place your typology of memes in, say, the work that Tyler Bennett has done with Tardo signs, and the work of Hammerslev.
Yeah, so the part of the analysis that is about the quasi signs, I actually, for the case of simplicity, I removed the concept Tardo sign, not to put too much terminology, but basically, yes, post semiotic quasi signs are Tardo signs, and to a large extent, my analysis of memes here builds on Tyler's analysis of Tardo signs. So one option to define memes is just to say that memes are Tardo signs. If the word Tardo sign is not in itself confusing for you.
Thank you.
Other question? Let me try.
Yeah. So this is really a beautiful analysis, and you didn't emphasize well enough, I think, that this 66 is precisely a Persian 66. And you simply illustrated the Persian classification via using this weird concept of sign, of mean. But now I always have had this another aspect here when to talk about memes, and that is purely how to say it, kind of ideological, because meme comes from the concept via Dawkins, from most extreme type of neo-Darwinism, which itself is so very well misleading all our thinking in biology. Therefore, I would have chosen that just to be silent about meme. When we just interpret your talk as a really highly intellectual kind of play, from which we can also learn something in our biosemiotics, then I would very much appreciate your talk. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kalle. Well, I've seen that you also referred to the word meme in that article of yours about Emon. So you also try to use it somehow and relate to it somehow. But I would say that my approach here is maybe not Jesus smuggling, but semiotics smuggling. Although I am skeptical about this neo-Darwinist interpretation of memes, I would say that we can try to bring semiotics in different domains. And if some people find it amusing to speak about memes in terms of memes, we can try to use this as an opportunity to bring more semiotics into these different discussions of culture evolution. But yeah, maybe there are some. There are certainly some problematic connotations in the word of meme. The question is whether they are too problematic or they are problematic enough for us to try to tackle them and build some bridges and make some sense of memes.
Hi, this is Merdine Anderson. I just have a small maybe question, and that is, why must we make everything useful?
Well, we can just kind of contemplate on the images of Dawkins and think about how awesome he is and how awesome memes are. If you enjoy this kind of activity, that's all right. I was well maybe it's a more serious way, maybe because I'm inclined to this kind of pragmatic approach to semiotics. That's why the question of how to make stuff useful seems to be one of the central questions of semiotics to me. So well, that's why I tend to frame a question this way.
If there are no other questions.
Wait. I want to say something. Yeah. So, we had a commercial semiotics presentation on Tuesday, Ivan. And so in commercial semiotics, a lot of what we do has to do with branding, right? And so a lot of it has to do with, how do you say, cohesion between different representations of a company, of products, services, etc. And, if we take the, stand to arms thing seriously of Peirce, right? So I'm thinking here, Fabian Scheidler in his book, The End of the Mega Machine. He took that word mega machine from the historian, Mumford. Yeah, Lewis Mumford. And he says, when we treat humans as billiard balls, we get irrational and sort of erratic behavior, right? And so there's a sort of typing that when we have a sort of cutoff sign and we treat people in a dyadic relationship where it's command and obey, that this somehow treats us as if we were inanimate objects, but because we are not, that there's an excess or remainder there that does harm in ways that are not predictable and how that harm will be sussed out or dealt with. So I find this argument very convincing because I'm starting to map on, Peirce talks about it. Many others have noticed that when you take a triadic relationship and you reduce it to a dyadic one, that does something to the human psyche. And in zoos, you see stereotypical behavior when you take away the umwelt of an animal and they start biting their hands off. So I'm wondering how you see memeticism, one, developing across time. I know you did your engram, but I'm curious about the whole idea of replication. Are we talking about Warhol here? Are we talking about Benjamin and the Oratic? What is sort of your understanding of the advent of the meme? Is it just a phoneme? Was language itself a meme that sort of forced everybody else into this program of using declarative rather than what was the other one? Not imperative sort of ways of communicating, because that allowed us to sort of have an edge up on those who were using that form of semiosis, and then thus we're in sort of this race to the most sort of instrumental logic. How do you see it?
Yeah, the way I see it is that I would say that quasi signs are definitely, well, maybe not definitely, but in my view that they are there, and quasi signs are useful. I'm not sure we are able, if an agent is limited only to quasi signs, that's the problem. But if all our signs are full-fledged triadic signs, I'm also not sure that we can function, that agents can function that way. I think that life is part some dyadic automatic stuff, and there is also some element of freedom and interpretation and choice. And I think we have to work on these both legs. And what makes the concept of meme problematic is that it kind of tries to hop on this one leg of just dyadic replication. But if we insist on being too triadic ourselves, and just assume that all these signs are full-fledged triadic signs, then we also kind of hop on this one triadic leg, and it can also be problematic.